All right, welcome back to episode 31 of The Hunt. Today you're joined by Ben and Aiden once again. Mate, how you going?
Excellent, mate. How are you?
Fucking hell. Not good. I'm just getting over I don't know if I got the flu or not, but just a bit crook. So apologies for, our noses being, closed off like a blockade at the moment. I think you got on something similar too.
Yeah, pretty much. Just like a little bit less than you.
Yeah.
I was taking paracetamol. You're taking pseudoephedrine.
Yeah, the heavy shit. But yeah, don't test me. But the gym, something's going on at the gym. Like, I don't know. People are coming around feeling a bit more crook than usual. Yep. I just feel like this is the sickest year that I've been personally. Like, I just feel like I haven't had a break yet. But I've been overseas. I've been experiencing the fluffy grass of Lithuania. But I don't know. Have you noticed much of it?
That's fair. Nah, not really. Like, I think the sickest that I was like during that period where I got COVID like 2 to 3 times.
Yeah.
And it was like COVID, then like the regular flu, then COVID again, then the regular flu. And now like all my antibodies are just beefed up.
Fucking oath.
So I'm good.
Yeah, they've done some serious periodization.
That's it, man. Intensification. I'm
Yeah.
ready. I'm peaked.
That's good. Well, the most exciting thing about my day at the moment is that the Paris Olympics started last night, mate. Were you aware? I was up at 11:30 watching the rugby sevens, which was cool. Straight to bed afterwards because I think it's only 7-minute halves, so it's over in 14 minutes. Yep. But it was good to see Australia got 2 wins. I woke up to a nice win against Kenya this morning, which was great.
Yep.
But yeah, do you get around the Olympic festivities, mate? Are you a big Olympic guy?
Not too much, actually. Like my current, what would you call it? The thing that I'm really locked into at the moment is waiting for the NFL season to start because we've got the fantasy league starting.
100%.
So yeah, I've been watching the new season of Receiver. I just finished that last night, and yeah, it was funny because literally like we were just talking about being sick, and a few days ago, just before I hit my big primary deadlifts week 3, I was like feeling really crook like that day. And I watched the episode where like Devontae Adams is like comparing himself to like MJ's like flu game because he was like sick as fuck.
Oh,
and he played his game with the Raiders. It was like last one of the season. And they scored like 63.
That's
points.
hectic.
And yeah, I was like, let's go.
I'm
ready.
The biggest thing I think, which I find that like if you're sick and you are training, like do you tend to lean towards still training or like are you just training at a different time to avoid people? Obviously wiping down your equipment. Like how do you approach your training when you are sick?
Like I treat it like I'm an athlete and I just need to train.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Unless I'm like unless I'm laid out, like something has knocked me and I'm training. I'm getting it done. I'll just take like painkillers and, take the procedures to make sure that I'm not putting anyone else at risk of getting sick, especially around like significant period times where other people are competing.
Yeah.
I make sure I stay away from them. If people have really important things in their training coming up, I'll stay away and just keep to myself. But I'm always making sure that I'm training as frequently as I can.
Yeah.
Because like you never know when that week that you have to inevitably take time off will come. Yeah. And I want to reduce the amount that I can within my control as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. And the biggest thing is that like people tend to like think the opposite. Like my body is obviously fatigued and I do need to recover. But I think the process of detraining and people say like, oh, it takes like 2 weeks to detrain. But I do genuinely feel like if I take any time off, even if it's just like one day, my body feels completely different. Yeah. So I think similar to you, my stance on it, just train at different times, avoid the significant people who are getting ready for competitions, and just make sure that like you're prioritizing like those recovery measures like sleep, water, fucking, keeping your tissues next to you, not leaking around everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. And then like, if you have to pull back, like just have a chat with your coach about what you should do to just make sure that you can maintain some kind of stimulus so that you're not just completely throwing the towel in. You know what I mean?
I agree. So today we'll get on with the topic because we don't want to hold people hostage for too long on this podcast. Yeah. But the main thing we're going to talk about is essentially like you don't have a choice towards the leverages that you have been given. So thank what your mama gave you type thing, right? And when we talk about leverages, we're talking about like people who are just more advantageous when they deadlift having long arms or having short arms when they bench press or having like a really short, stocky legs to squat. Generally, these sorts of people are going to have a much easier time with the lifts that favor them. So in saying that, you can't change the lengths of your limbs or those leverages. So today, Benny and I, we're just going to have a discussion around like how do we create leverage for those people who have not been like gifted or quote unquote predisposed to those advantages when it comes across to SBD. So I think, Benny, like my question to you is what is the most common leverage that you see that comes into the gym when we talk about, like, if you have like a box of people that do powerlifting, what is the most common leverage that you see that gives them, generally speaking, the most biggest advantage towards a singular lift?
So I'd say like they come in different like brackets, right? Because obviously a few of them are antagonizing in what you're going to be good at straight off the bat. So people with long limbs, typically really good at deadlifting. People who have shorter arms and bigger rib cages, wider infrasternal angles, better at bench. People who have really short femurs, better at squatting, that kind of thing. So, you know, you just basically, when they walk in the door, you can identify just by looking at them, you know, if you're a knuckle dragger, you're going to be picking up some heavy shit off the floor, you know? So, yeah, that's my stance on it pretty much.
And I think it's pretty cool. So, like, between you and I, like, when anyone walks through the door, if they're a new lifter or if we're onboarding someone, even last night, Jung sent me a video of her new lifter, Nate Hatcher.
Yep.
And just goes, look at this guy's fucking torso. Like, look at this guy's arms. Like, look at this guy's legs. And we automatically know what we're looking at when it comes to, like, holy shit, this person, like, really leans into the advantages that it takes to move barbells in either a squat, bench, or deadlift. So I think it is a really good skill to have as a coach, is to, like, easily identify what those levers look like. So I think we'll just go through each lever and we'll just discuss between us both, like, what is an advantage for, you know, long arms and deadlifting, for example. And then how do we counteract create the short arm position for a bench press for that long arm person.
Yeah.
So I think we'll start with, long arm people. Generally speaking, people who have long arms are going to obviously find it easier to deadlift. So how do we increase their bench press? I think the biggest thing is that because they're going through a larger range of motion, this is what's first coming to mind, is we want to try and address the muscular system. Because if they're going through a longer range of motion, there's going to be a greater demand on mechanical tension across the muscle fibers. So therefore, they're going to have some sort of base or lean tissue mass to be able to support that range of motion. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. Like, even if you have good, like, great leverages for bench press, I think that just having more muscle mass to support the positions is always going to be beneficial for anyone. So when you have someone who's significantly disadvantaged by the fact that they have to move the bar twice as far, absolutely. It's just going to add to their raw pressing power. And ultimately then you can use that system within your technique, and then it's going to express itself way better.
Yeah. And I think that the main thing is when it comes to building muscle for someone who does have long arms, and we will dive into this because we have a bit of a Q&A at the end, but the accessories that you select, they've really got to kind of address a number of things where you're looking at, okay, are they specific to the bench press, right? And how we are going to mimic the positions of what those long arms are going to demand. So we're looking at deep shoulder extension, deep elbow flexion, and obviously like a lot of posterior compression of the back. A lot of those sort of things are really, really important when it comes to coaching a long arm person to improve their bench press. But what would you say would be the second thing that would be on the list behind muscle building, mate, when it comes to improving the bench press for a long arm deadlifter?
I'd say just creating more advantageous position. You know what I mean? And you can kind of touch on this with, as you kind of alluded to, the accessory selection. So you can put the body in positions that are going to mimic what we need out of your bench press. And that's not just to create strength in those ranges, but to get your body familiar with those positions so that it can adopt it when you lay down on the bench and want to press the bar. So like really simple examples of that can be things such as like rowing, like getting like your back involved in shoulder extension, making sure that you're holding anterior ribcage expansion at the time so that you're practicing what it's like to fill that space with air so that you can keep a bigger arch, reduce your range as much as you can. And then, using the pecs in that position as well. Whether that's through dumbbell work, machine pressing, that type of thing.
Fucking push-ups.
Push-ups.
Push-ups are fantastic. Dips are really good too.
Dips are unbelievable. Like literally, you know, when you talked about just before where it's like trying to access a range of deep shoulder extension and elbow flexion, dips are just unbelievable for that. You know what I mean? If you're taking them deep, like, you know, you're smashing all the targets, you can load them up heavily. So you're going to expose yourself to potentially some extra stimulus to push your bench. And then also the fact that it's so demanding on the target muscles that you are just going to create a lot of hypertrophy from it. So
I think the cool thing that we have in regards to the model here at Hunter Performance Center is we address the muscular system first, then we address the position. But the third thing after position is movement.
Yep.
So if we have the right positions, like you don't have to change anything, right? We just focus on the actual movement at hand. So with the person who does have the longer arm position in the bench press because they're just predisposed to it, how do we get them moving in a way to create short arm position? So we accessorize the program.
Yep.
We get them understanding what it feels like to move the floppy part of their body through that range of motion. So the rib cage obviously moves, and obviously you got a lot of guts, you got a lot of air, you got a lot of spaces that fill that area of the thorax. So once you've got those positions locked in, we can start focusing on the movement.
Yep.
How do the elbows bend? How do the wrist extend? How does the shoulder move? How do you actually, like, should you bench in retraction, elevation, or depression and protraction?
Yep.
Should you be thinking about drawing the scaps together when you come down, or should you be thinking about protracting them as you press? There's so many different ways you can coach someone in the bench press that literally the easiest way to coach someone with the long arms is just to do what feels natural. And you can only assume and hope that the accessories or the positions that you're achieving through the accessories are just going to support that natural position for the lifter. Because in my experience, I feel like anyone that I've coached, or even myself, if I am antagonizing the way that I move naturally in the bench press, I just feel like I'm fighting against gravity, literally. And it feels like I literally can't move the bar as well if I just pressed it like normal. So I guess, like, when it comes to programming the long arm deadlifter again for movement, Benny, like, how are you kind of programming those exercises to get them moving well, that I guess helps them understand the way they move because of their long arms?
Yeah, I think a big consideration there is like how progressed they are at deadlifting. Like, just because someone has the leverages to be good at deadlifting, it doesn't mean that they're moving a heap of mass. Whereas someone like yourself is obviously has the predisposition when they're deadlifting that weight is going to be pulling their shoulders into that like elevated, protracted position. Like, you live down here, like forward. So that's going to dictate a lot of the position that you have to adopt and really work on when you're trying to address the bench. Whereas someone who walks in like Sam White, like, you know, he's really like long arm, one of my clients here, but he doesn't necessarily deadlift that heavy yet. He's really good at them straight off the bat, but fortunately for us, like, we don't have to fight the fact that he holds like 300 kilos in his hands, pulling him forward, and then have to antagonize that by training the shit out of his upper back. So I think that that's a really big consideration. I think, like, when you start to look at it from that perspective as well, you can start to split it into like, okay, if you live up in this protracted position and you find yourself slipping up into it, maybe it is worth like experiencing or experimenting with that elevated retraction position for bench. And if it works, it works. And then if it doesn't, you go into that more depressed like state, you know, getting your shoulders back and down, tucking the elbows, like trying to get your lats involved.
And that's the biggest thing, sorry to interrupt, but like when it comes to people who are trying to figure out like what best position suits them, all you need to do is just stick to one thing for at least one block and then see how it goes. But if you're coming in overthinking your technique and you're changing too many variables at once, you just end up spinning your wheels because there are too many moving parts, not just in like your position, but also your movement. Like, as we just said, the biggest principle that any coach should have is address the position, then address the movement. So if you keep those two things fixed for at least a block, then you know that you have that process of elimination, and then you can move on to the next thing.
And that's a great point. Like, it's technique is just like programming in the sense where it's like, if you change something every single week, you're never going to understand what's actually working for you or working against you, rather. You know what I mean? Because we want to eliminate those factors that are regressing or like kind of like creating stagnant progress in a given movement, right?
So I think, the bottom line is, if you're a long arm person and you're struggling to do bench press, the best thing that you can possibly do is to actually just focus on moving naturally. Okay, so like that's the best thing. If you're trying to antagonize those long arms, you're probably going to find it really hard to bench press. So just let the bar come down. Keep obviously that position that you've been training through your accessories and obviously bench frequency to hold yourself together, and then push through. Now let's talk about the opposite, short arm people. Right, so we can probably speak more on like deadlifting and how that is influenced when it comes to a short arm person. So we're grateful to have literally those two different types of people in this room today. So we can talk lengths on this, but personally, like when someone comes in and I can tell they've got really short arms, generally speaking, them upper body development is quite good because their tissues are more concentrically orientated. That's a fucking mouthful. But basically, like, they're going to be more jacked because they have a larger surface area through their rib cage. They're a bigger person in general if they do have short arms. Because the one end of the attachment to the other end of the insertion is going to be a shorter distance.
Yep.
That distance means the muscle's going to be more bunched up and it's going to be bigger, right? They're going to be more predisposed to being jacked.
Yep.
So therefore,
Keys,
literally. So therefore, how do we, I guess, train them to be better at deadlifting? How do we elongate those tissues? How do we get them in positions that actually help their deadlift grow if they have short arms?
Yeah. So like you just use the exact same principles that we discussed when you break it down into those 3 segments, right? You know what I mean? So you can accessorize what they're doing and just make it more beneficial in the opposite way that we just discussed for bench. So instead of training like extension and those types of qualities, you want to train like protraction, reaching, like getting posterior expansion of the rib cage so that you can adopt positions that are going to allow a more like long arm style of deadlifting, right?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing as well that I see with people who have that like predisposition to being really good at bench press is they either have a really flat and like just not strong back at all, or it's really extended.
Yeah.
And not extended in the right place.
Nah,
it's extended through the thoracic and then kind of flat through the lumbar. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see when you look at people who are good at benching and not so good at deadlifting is that you need to start creating a bit of shape change in those 2 spaces so that they can hold some relatively strong lumbar extension, because that's going to allow them to push more throughout their pelvis position.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is just so that they can hold some thoracic flexion and posterior expansion of the rib cage so that they're not really like fighting the bar with their upper body and they can lock out when they're a bit longer.
Yep. So the interesting thing that we're both talking about here is that we're discussing these long arm people thinking like literally the limbs of your body, but we are addressing the limbs of your body with the things that are happening proximally to the body. So we're talking about, upper back compression in regards to accessorizing the program and actually like focusing on getting the ribs forward for long arm people. But now for the short arm people, we're thinking about the opposite direction, right? Yep. Like we're focusing on the proximal to the distal. So if you're quote unquote trying to improve the deadlift, and you do definitely need to actually address like how much strain that lower back and that pelvis structure is going to have to take when it comes to, folding in half like a fishing rod over the bar because you have short arms.
Yeah.
So I think the general rule of thumb is that the positions that you want to try and achieve are lumbar extension, obviously, because you're probably going to be very good at flexing your lumbar.
Yeah.
And then the other thing as well is, upper back expansion, thoracic rounding, like getting those spinal curves that you need to be able to improve the deadlift. And that inevitably is going to create the longer arm position.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's just like anyone who's listening and they're kind of struggling to get their head around what it is. If you just literally put your arm up in the air and then reach your hand forward to touch the wall in front of you, your arm gets longer, but like objectively, the structure of your arm didn't get any longer. Your shoulder just had more ability to reach forward.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. You know those like funny videos where they're like, they've got a person up against the wall, like, oh, touch the wall. And you can't reach it. And then they're like, okay, bend down, touch your toes. Now come back up, touch the wall. Oh, I can touch the wall suddenly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that sort of shit. Like that's literally what happens when you create that posterior expansion. Like you just create more movement through, I guess, that posterior chain, which allows you to get longer arms, quote unquote.
Yep.
Okay, so that achieves the position. So what about movement? So we're talking about like people who are going to have short arms. The distance of travel through hip flexion is going to be much larger in the deadlift, right?
Yep.
And there's going to be probably more of a degree of like squatting your deadlift too, which we've seen cause many issues for some people in regards to like, getting through that sticking point. So how are we programming certain movements to be able to get around a short arm person in the deadlift?
I'd say that just restoring or creating a fuck ton of push in their deadlift is by far the easiest way.
Yeah.
Because I think like when you look at people who are trying to move the bar in that like extended position, it becomes really pulley, and they're just trying to like fight the bar off the ground instead of emphasize a heap of push. And typically we can see like sumo lifters do this really well, and you just want to emulate what they're doing over there and put it into the short arm deadlifters conventional, because 9 times out of 10, if they're short arm, they're probably not going to benefit a sumo position. But in saying that, creating this position throughout the spine that's going to allow you to leverage more push with your legs, that's a really good way of doing it. And then just assessing like how you can control your center of mass so that your shoulders stay over the bar the entire time and you're not getting yanked forward. Because that's a really common issue with short arm people. Like you said, you're kind of in this really deep hip flexion kind of position. And if you bias that too much with like that squatty type of position, your hips are going to be low. As soon as you try to break the floor, you get pulled forward, shoulders are over the bar, and then you're pulling again.
Yeah.
So just trying to bias that throughout correct accessory selection. I really love programming 3 counts and pause deadlifts. And then also just making sure that they're using the right bias of foot pressure. I feel like a lot of people who are like really short armed get pitched forward over the bar. And then as a result, they're trying to fall back into their heels to like pull it off the floor. So just making sure that you're like creating good midfoot pressure, keeping the big toe down and driving as hard as you can.
Yeah. So what would come with that is obviously like very good cueing, and 3 counts to the knee is really good for people like this if their lower back doesn't get too fatigued.
Yeah, that's a big consideration.
And then the other thing as well is belt squats are just like phenomenal for these sort of people. And generally speaking, if like you're a short arm person, you are most likely doing conventional deadlifting. Whenever you squat, you're working on your push in the deadlift at the same time as well. So having a very good understanding of like your legs in space and feeling what your legs are doing during the squat can actually train the deadlift at the same time as well.
For sure.
But another one is RDLs.
Right? Literally took the words out of my mouth.
RDLs are fantastic. The thing is though with RDLs is that they can be done very poorly or done very well.
Yes.
Now, we could do a whole nother podcast on fucking RDLs alone because like they're so specific to the individual when it comes to training the external and internal rotators of the hip, like how you're actually like lengthening the hamstring in order to get the result of the movement through the conventional or sumo deadlift. So I guess like from your experience, like how did the RDLs help your deadlift and how do they help your push in that sense?
So I think the biggest thing is they like really help someone with those like non-advantageous leverages to learn how to push with their posterior chain instead of pulling with it. I think that is by far the most phenomenal thing you can get out of them for this type of deadlifter.
And I think that's the thing. If you learn how to push with an RDL, like that is fucking unbelievable.
Oh yeah. And that's when you see these people who just look like for lack of a better term, like extension powerhouses who like are pushing the bar off the floor and you can see that they're fighting it and they get to the knee and then it's just like yoink, like they just lock it out immediately. And that's because they're not transferring into like a pull based lockout. It's all push. And they've learned that through creating fuck tons of lumbar extension that just does not break. And then the fact that they can intentionally push with their posterior chain.
So this is going a bit off of a tangent, but like hopefully you guys have learned a lot in regards to short-armed people and how we can help them improve their deadlifts. But the funny thing is like when people are struggling to break that sticking point off the floor and they do have short arms and then it gets to that knee point and it's just like yoink, like the thing just like stands up and locks out. I personally have found some pretty good results in training the lifter to just lift in more flexion, like not lumbar extension, just a little bit more flexion because what we're looking at when people break off the floor really fucking fast is that they're probably most likely going to be globally flexed throughout the entire system. And then they're just going to have to like really fight for the lockout position because they've compromised so much hip extension off the floor because of that rounded position. So what I guess we're looking at is there's this kind of balance, right? Like if you can be more flexed off the floor and gain that speed, but if you can also strengthen your extension through like an RDL or something, you can kind of train both worlds of the conventional deadlift. But I think it comes down to like, can the athlete tolerate those like different positions? Because that is a great demand on the spine and the erectors and the entire system to be able to flex and extend. And arguably the spine is obviously meant to be able to do that. But when it's like top end load, getting ready for a meet, you're doing singles, doubles, triples, whatever it may be, twice a week even, like you just got to make sure that your lifter is equipped to that style of technique and they know what they're doing and they understand the difference between pulling with literal flexion and not being able to lock out the bar or pulling with flexion as a means of like breaking the floor and being able to rip into extension to lock it out at the top.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like this can get as deep as it can on the individual level, but with my actual experience, it's been that I can train to create so much extension that my lower back is just absolutely bulletproof. And if I then lean into this like more flexed system to access like better hip extension or better breaking of the floor,
Yep.
if I feed into that system too much, then I entirely lose my push on the deadlift.
Yeah.
Because I lose that like pelvis position to then be able to like actually create force into the ground.
Yeah.
So it's kind
Through
of a
that middle part though.
Yeah. Through like it's that like, I don't know, it's like kind of a balancing act, right? You know what I mean? So
Like you'll go through these ebbs and flows. Like you'll go through biasing extension, then you go through biasing flexion. You just keep going back and forth. But generally speaking, the reason why people fly off the floor with like so much flexion and they struggle to lock out is simply because the femurs get pushed so far back in space that their pelvis literally just loads up so much force that they can just push with their legs like a leg press, and then they just cannot lock out their hips because they're so far back in space through their hips. So that's why, generally speaking, people struggle to lock out their deadlift. But I do believe it's a strategy that can help people if they're struggling to break the floor in the deadlift.
for sure.
But you got to keep going back and forth through the continuum of like, okay, we're training more extension now. Okay, we're training more flexion now. Okay, training more extension now. It's just like people who squat in flats and go to heels for a little bit, come back to flats. Like the body's always changing and evolving. You've just got to be adaptable and reactive in your programming and obviously try and make the most of it.
It's literally like anything in powerlifting. It's like you find something that you're probably not good at movement-wise, like within the qualities. You train it, you become really good at it, and then you get too good at it, so you have to train the opposite way again.
That, bro. Hate getting too good at powerlifting.
Yeah, bro, not too good at powerlifting. It's too good at extending or flexing. And
Yeah,
then
literally.
All of a sudden, you're like, oh, I'm sore.
Yeah, but like it's sagittal sport. Like it's forward and back, right? Like literally that you got two positions that you got to be good at, and unfortunately you can't be good at them at that same time. You pick one or the other, and then you got to flip it around and then do the other side.
sure.
But again, like I said, it's about the reactiveness of your coach and like them seeing it happen, and then you explaining how it feels, like the athlete feedback for that sort of like system. If the athlete understands how they feel, like, bro, I'm fucking extended as fuck today, or bro, I cannot extend my back at all today. Like if the athlete understands that, like you're a fucking weapon. And I think that comes down to education, right? Like 100%. Having these conversations. And again, like most people at the top, like they don't really talk about this sort of stuff because the best athletes in the world that I've met, generally speaking, they aren't the smartest athletes in the world. They're just like dumb strong. But the people who are trying to get to the top and they don't have those genetics, hard work works. And if you are working hard to understand like these sort of systems, then it's going to like results are going to gravitate towards you. You know what I mean?
And I think it's probably worth noting while we're on this topic as well is that like a lot of people, like when you start introducing them to these different movement variability, like the different positions, strengthening those positions, lifting in those positions, it's not going to be comfortable.
No.
It's going to probably feel like shit for the first part. Using your lower back for the first time ever is going to feel like I'm going to hurt myself. But it's not like that's not what's happening.
No.
Like you're using the tissue, you're challenging it, and therefore, and if you're using it for the first time, like think back to the first time that you ever went into the gym and hit a leg extension AMRAP on your first day. And you couldn't walk for 3 days. That's what your lower back is experiencing this first time that we're ever training it, right? And it goes the same deal, like, you know, if you're trying to manipulate the rib cage, you're like lengthening the musculature between the ribs, like the intercostals and things like that. Those could have been compressed for so long, and now there's so much demand on them getting lengthened that your body's just going to be like, I don't want to do this anymore.
How funny
Start
is
sending you pain signals.
Yeah, pain signal. Like I was going to say, rib pain is like the most common thing for people doing powerlifting within the first 2-3 years of their sport because their ribs are like finally either shortening or lengthening, and fucking hell, like rib pain in powerlifting is probably the most excruciating pain you can probably ever experience.
It is just the most wild experience of all time. I remember when I was doing my first ever peak, you'll probably remember this. I was literally like, this was my first time, like, you know, experiencing this kind of thing, like where you have pain that you can actually push through and just like, it's something that's just there. Like it's not necessarily that you've injured any structures. It's just your body saying, bro, like this is getting a bit much. And that's what peaking is. You know what I mean? Your body's not meant to do it. So it's going to tell you to stop.
100%.
And yeah, I remember like I was like still working in construction at the time, and I was like in the middle of the day, I'd be having like 8 to 9 out of 10 pain in my rib, especially if I gave it like any stability demand. Whereas like
it'd be the dumbest shit, dude.
If I'm like leaning over or something,
having a sneeze,
bro, or having a sneeze, not good. No. And like I remember this one time, like I climbed up this like signal, and I had to like undo a bolt like off the ladder. and I've leant to do it, and my fucking rib cage, man, it was like I just got shot. And I was like, bro, I was like literally like heavy breathing through it at the top. Like the boys are like, mate, you all right?
And the
I'm
worst
like, yeah,
part
just give me a sec.
Worst part is no one understands.
No one gets it.
No one gets it because you don't get it in any other fucking sport.
No. And then literally like that night, I go in and squat like a 2.5 kilo PR.
Yeah.
No worries. Like, you know, as soon as I'm like bilaterally moving with like a belt on again, got some weight on my back, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But like day to day, I'm like dying, bro.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. But that's just what happens when you're trying to introduce your body to these positions that it's not necessarily meant to adopt, you know? And I think on the topic of like what we were talking about before, people who really suck at getting in good positions for bench, it's going to be the most uncomfortable thing you've ever experienced
100%.
because contorting your body into that position is very unnatural.
That's why if you're a beginner lifter, but you're pretty strong and you haven't really experienced like proper powerlifting programming before, excuse me, and you pick up a coach, there will be moments of regression because the coach is trying to teach you all these like new positions, which we alluded to before.
Yep.
Then we're trying to teach you the movement. Then the money starts being made. You know what I mean?
Course, yeah.
In results. But Benny, I think we could go on for fucking ages in regards to like, you know, different limb lengths, leverages and whatnot. But they're the two most common: long arm, short arm people. Like we see the bench press being affected and the deadlift being affected with those two different types of levers.
Yep.
We could talk about, you know, long and short torso.
Yep.
But fuck, we'll save it for another episode, eh?
Yeah, right. Do you want to go over squat quickly or no? Just leave it.
Well, like generally speaking, like I think the squat is probably like the most static no matter what.
Yeah.
I think the only real difference is for people who have like a different style of squatting is the lengths of their femurs.
Yeah.
That's generally it. Like you could argue long torso, short torso and this and that, but you see definitely two different styles of squatting between a long femur person and a short femur person.
Yep.
Because that's going to make them more knee dominant or it's going to make them more hip dominant.
Yep.
But did you want to dive into it?
Oh, well, like, I think that generalizes it pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't think there's too many differences you really make out of the demands that the squat kind of presents for those two people.
No. I'll tell you what, the best way to understand the squat,
Yeah.
right? This goes for anyone. Like, no matter if you've got a long, short torso, this, that, the other. The main thing is when it comes to being able to produce a massive squat is how well can you center your mass.
Oh, 100%.
Like that is literally it.
Yeah.
If you can center your mass under the bar and you understand that you have to have more of a hip dominant or knee dominant squat, you're perfect. You're set. Okay. If you record yourself from the side and your center of mass, a good cue is looking at the bar path. If it's on the piss and it's moving all over the shop, then obviously you need to just address your center of mass.
Yep.
How do I get into the proper position to find my center of mass? You either need to hinge more or stay more upright.
Yep, for sure.
Plain and simple.
That's
literally
it. And then it like comes back as well just to playing around with your rib cage because that's going to be the
Of
biggest
course.
dictator of how to control your center of mass under the bar.
Yeah.
And then you can start to think about how you're kind of applying that center of mass into the hip or the knee so that you
Yeah.
can move down and up. But yeah, like it just becomes more of a hinge or less of a hinge
Yep.
for people who have relatively longer or shorter femurs.
When we have SPD assessments here at HPC and people come in to like, you know, show us how they move, what's the first thing we do? We just tell them,
Just show me how you do it.
show me how you
Show me what you got.
show me what you do. Like we can just get under the bar, do what you usually do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Because there is no point in me trying to unteach the natural thing that you're already doing.
Exactly.
Because you just gotta do what you're doing, and then once you've done it, we can just make some small adjustments from there. But yeah, like that goes for any PTs or coaches listening. Like if you have an onboard session with someone brand new, get them to show you what they've been doing, and then just move them from there. Because otherwise, you're just wasting both your time.
Yep.
Like if you're just talking and waffling.
100%. Because like if you see what they're doing first, you can outline the one or two things that are the big rocks that they need to address straight away. Instead of just going, okay, this is how we do things, and then give them 7 cues, and then they forget fucking all of them, and they move like shit, and they're less enthused or informed about the exercise than they
Yeah.
were when they walked in, because now
Exactly
they're just
right.
confused.
Exactly right. And like I said before, simplicity is key. Just like they're meant to go up and down, center their mass, hinging, knees forward, one of the two, more of the other, who knows?
Yep.
Just do that and you'll be sweet.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of waffling, we'll just move on because
Let's do it.
I don't want to keep people holding, hostile for too long. So we've got a bit of a Q&A. We reached out to the listeners and we got back a few questions and I've just picked out the best 4. Now, Now we're going to go back and forth with them, mate.
All right.
The second one's actually going to be more directed to you, so I'll give you my phone. You can ask me the first one.
All right.
Because Benny just recently got his certificate in nutrition, everyone.
There you go, mate. Round of applause.
Yeah.
Hey.
So if you're looking for nutrition advice, or I guess if you're after weight class management, or you're after someone who can take care of your body composition at a very cost-effective price, go to our website, click on the nutrition inquiry, and fill out a form.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go. First question.
Okay, cool. So number one, which accessories are most important and what happens if you skip them?
Double loaded question.
Double loaded,
All
double
right.
barrel, click clack.
I think so. In a program, we're looking at like the accessories that influence SBD. I think they're the most important ones. Okay, because you can program accessories to have a better outcome for squat, bench, or deadlift the following day, or the next exercise, or the next week. So, for example, like I don't know if many people like do this, but if you cannot tolerate barbell squatting twice a week and then belt squat is your secondary day, like that's going to be a very, very high priority. Otherwise, your primary squat's going to probably feel like dog shit. So the accessories that influence SBD, I think, are the, without a doubt, utmost important.
Yep.
The ones that you should skip, if you have to skip, because you shouldn't be skipping your exercises, I would say would just be like the exercises for the outer extremity. So like leg extensions, bicep curls, maybe not tricep extensions so much, but if it's within the 10, 15 rep range, maybe. Yep. Lateral raises, like everything that is like, again, like I said, towards the outer extremity of the body.
Yep.
Generally speaking, everything towards the proximal part of the body, like lower back extensions, RDLs, being able to do like Bulgarians, for example, like all those sort of exercises are really, really important because they're probably changing and assisting more of the structures that complement SBD.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about here, like a powerlifting program, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have any, I guess, like, do you agree with me, or like, are you against it? Or
100% agree. And I think like what you said is like bang on. I feel like you have like in the program, you have the big rocks, which is your SBD work. So your literal barbell work. And then you have like your supplementary SBD accessories, which are going to drive some stimulus to those. So whether that be like an RDL for a deadlift, or whether that be a belt squat for a squat, dips for a bench press, or flat dumbbell pressing for a bench press, for instance. And then after that, you've got the other things that are more like positional. So we're looking at, like we just waffled on about the lumbar extension, 45-degree hypers. If I skipped those, I'd probably blow my back out. But things like that. And then you've got your more like hypertrophy focused type of work where you're doing like 8 to 12 rep ranges on just isolated movements, that type of thing.
like the single joint arm exercises, fuck them off.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing as well is just considering like if you are time short, you only need 2 hard sets. That's all you need.
Yep.
2 hard sets. You don't have to rest. When you're doing isolateral like work, like isolateral. What word am I looking for?
Isometric.
Isometric.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like you know when you're like isolating the joint. That's what I meant.
Yeah, you're holding, you're not moving.
Yeah. So when you're doing that type of work, like the demand on the system of the body is very insignificant. Yeah. It's going to hurt and it's going to feel like you're working hard, but you can probably hop off the machine for 30 seconds, get back in and get the work done.
My arm work literally is the extent of 1 set of 10 and 8.
Yep.
And then 1 set of MRAP of the same load. And that's all I do. And I get the hecticest arm pumps ever.
100%.
And that's all you need to do. You don't need to do just 2 hard sets of your accessories if you're time short, and then that's a perfect mix.
Yeah, and like that's obviously if it's consistent, that's a conversation you want to have with your coach.
Yeah.
But if you're just like, man, I literally have 20 minutes to get all these accessories done.
Yep.
Superset circuit, giant set circuit, like smash them out, just be back and forth, getting them done. Yep. If you've got 3 sets, 4 sets of each, just do 2 instead and do them hard.
Yep.
And that's it. Like that's all you need.
Fuck yeah. Like hectic pumps.
Hectic pumps.
All right, next question, mate.
Cool.
So simple. Just tips on getting lots of calories in.
Lots of calories in. So the thing is that like my body loves to store fat, so I'm not in this camp. So from personal experience, I've not really been in that realm too much, but with my experience of, just helping out or actually having some clients who are like really high calorie eaters, shout out Alex Williams. So I think the biggest thing that the boys, and potentially girls as well, who are high calorie eaters, they'll will probably struggle with when they're trying to get calories in, is trying to increase their carb intake for performance while keeping their fat content low.
Yeah.
Because it's like more of a moderate prescription when you're looking at how many fats you want to give someone. You know what I mean? I've got Alex, he weighs like 108 kilos, and when he came in to me, he was eating 200 grams of fat a day.
Yeah.
And just to get cows in, and I'm like, bro, that is nuts.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? That's not good. And so basically, I've given him a restructure of his calorie prescription. It probably ended up him being in like a 500 cal deficit based on what he was, but his carb intake was like plus 200. I was like, if we end up recomping from this, I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? He's a 105 athlete, and he's currently weighing like 108, so it's not the end of the world.
No, yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is just meal frequency, just making sure that you're giving yourself enough opportunities to get things in without binge eating, because that can lead to some really poor habits and obviously feeling like absolute dog shit. Choosing highly concentrated, like calorie dense foods around your training as well. Lamingtons, mate. Bloody jam rolls, your favorite.
I fucking love a jam
You
roll.
love a fucking jam roll. So like using the windows of opportunity to get big meals in as frequently as you can. Big breakfast, carb dense. Big dinner, carb dense. Lunch 2-3 hours before you train. And then before you train, like an hour before, you can use that to get just like some complex and simple carbohydrates in. Jam and bagel, the classic.
On the topic of complex and simple, I think it's just really important that like you aren't leaning more towards those simple carbohydrates if you're looking to get calories in.
Yes.
Because what happens is your blood sugar spikes and you feel fucking good for about 5 minutes, but then you die off. And if you're doing a powerlifting session and you just had a really high simple sugar meal with lots of sauce because you're just trying to get calories in, you're probably going to die in the ass towards the end of the session. So what do? You shake up a bit of Staminate or electrolytes. But the thing is, you don't really want to be doing that because you want to try and have sustained amount of energy source throughout the entire session, because you've got to think of a number of things when it comes to like consuming lots of sugar. Again, you're spiking your blood sugar, which isn't good for obviously your blood, but also like demineralization of your teeth.
Literally.
This is coming from a fucking ex-dentist. So like it's awful. Like
it's not good for your health.
No, it's not good for your health just eating sugar all the fucking time. So I think like you said, it's good to have a balance, but the balance isn't 50-50.
No.
It's probably like a third to 2/3. Would you agree?
80-20.
80-20?
80-20 I like, man. Like, you know, and I think the biggest thing as well is just finding staple meals that you really enjoy that have like really easily manipulatable like macro contents. Like the most stock standard version of this is like some kind of like protein with a like good tasting sauce just so it's palatable, and then you have like rice or potatoes or something on the side, and that's like your form of carbohydrates, which when the macros just start to build up, you can just add to those and you can just manipulate it really easily, and you have those pillars within your day that you can just kind of beef up the way that you want to. And then outside of that, just, like intra-workout carbs is a really easy way to do it. Like, you know what I mean? If you are having like Staminate or lollies and stuff like that, you know, if you've got space and you're not like looking to make weight or cut weight, like if you're just looking to get big calories in, just, man, like, you know what I mean? I think that's the biggest thing.
If you are having intra-workout carbs, just for the sake of your oral health, just have a switch of water afterwards. That's
Yeah. And then the other thing is just like, you know, understanding that if that's your big rock that you're really struggling with is eating enough, don't worry about the smaller things right at the start. Like you can build more habits later on. You know what I mean? You don't have to be eating perfect from the jump. You know what I mean? It just has to be good enough.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. All right, on to the next one, mate.
Alrighty, cool. So why do certain lifts seem to not improve?
Why do certain lifts seem to not improve? It comes down to, actually, we could probably touch on how we spoke before about like muscle, position, movement. So like obviously all those things are quite physical. And I think if your coach doesn't understand, or if you don't understand as an athlete because you self-program for some reason, if you don't understand those three things for the singular lift, and you are ticking all those things off, alternatively speaking, then the next thing to probably look at is probably like how you're being programmed. And this could be a fucking cluster fuck of things. It could be the frequency. It could be the literal layout of the frequency, so like how it is split over the course of the microcycle. It could be like volume allocation, but again, that ties back to leverages. Like, is it because you are pushing through a larger range of motion, or are you just one of those people that can tolerate a lot of volume through a larger range of motion? Are you looking at like too much volume, not enough volume? Are you looking at too hot, not hot enough? And when I say hot, I mean the bar's too heavy or it's not heavy enough, so intensity. Are you looking at maybe like you're injured and like there's something limiting you to move better or get into a better position? Are you looking at recovery?
Yep.
So like, are you actually like getting 8 to 9 hours a night of good sleep? And mind you, are those 8 to 9 hours actually at the right time of the day?
Yep.
Is your nutrition in order? Like there's heaps of shit that you could look at.
Yeah, I think it's literally, it comes down to, are you creating an environment where you can progress? Then are you moving in a way that's sustainable so that you can progress? And then is the program allowing you to progress?
Yeah, like if you're not like sleeping 8-9 hours,
Yeah.
if you're not eating well enough, if you're not doing what I'm saying, right, in regards to technique, and if you're not like giving me data, like sending through videos or filling out your program, like don't talk to me about lifts not improving yet.
Yeah.
Like you need to address, like you need to look inside yourself first,
Yep.
and then you can talk to me about the things that are going on outside of the actual like internal variables that you can control.
Yeah, you need to sign like the athlete contract to say,
Literally,
I'm
yeah.
going to do everything I can within my power to make this plan work.
Yeah.
And then you can tell whether the plan's working or not. Because, you know, the best plan in the world
Yeah.
isn't going to work if the athlete doesn't work.
Yep. Like that's it. That's all I got to say. Yeah, so if your lifts aren't improving, look at those things first. Look inside before you look outside. Muscle, position, movement, how are they looking? Programming variables, look at them. But again, before all those things, look at yourself. That's all I can say.
Have a bloody long, hard look in the mirror.
You can stare at yourself in the mirror. All right, the next one is... this actually helps you, mate, because you've done the back and forth on this one. When to try sumo deadlifting.
Okay. Cool. So I'd say when to try sumo deadlifting is when you've lost faith in your ability to conventional. That's a good time.
When you've fully submitted.
When you've fully just gone, man, I suck at this. But yeah, I think like having the assessment of what we've spoken about this entire podcast, where you look at the leverage and just think, oh, okay, this guy could probably be good at sumo. That's probably a good time to try it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think when they've plateaued for a significant amount of time in conventional and you've done the appropriate things in trying to leverage more push out of the athlete, trying to manipulate their movement technique and volume prescription so that they can facilitate some progress, it might be a good option to see if they can leverage a sumo deadlift a bit better.
Yeah.
I think the back and forth between it is pretty healthy because like you're never going to know until you try.
Yeah.
You could have someone who presents like they'd have an absolute like meaty sumo deadlift and then they go to like, you know, load up and it just does not hold up at top end. I think the biggest thing that I see with people who do try sumo deadlifting is that they pick up like 50% of their mats and they go, man, that felt good.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
they pick up 60%. That felt sick. 70% feels really good. They get above 80%, they can't break the ground.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like one of those things where the movements are similar, but they're also dissimilar in their like tolerance to volume because of the physical demands of each movement between the sumo or the conventional.
I'll go one even better for you. I reckon just do whichever's stronger.
Facts. Just that's so easy, bro.
Sport of numbers, mate. Like
Yeah.
just if the sumo's stronger than your conventional, just
Mate.
do the sumo. It doesn't matter how it fucking looks. If you pick up more weight.
If you're stronger, just like do that one.
Yeah.
Literally, like and if you are and like, you know, a lot of people have like a very small like disparity between the two. Like they might pull a conventional and they might only get plus 10 out of their sumo. But yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Pull sumo then. That's fine.
I have personally, as a coach, had experience of lifters go to do sumo, and then they've like learnt some qualities that really complement the conventional deadlift. Because like when you sumo deadlift, right, like your feet fucking they're out of here, and you are relatively internally rotated through the hip, right, because of just the position of where your feet are.
Yep.
When you have more internal rotation, you can push your pelvis into more anterior pelvic tilt, and long behold, more lumbar extension. So training that pelvic position and how it influences like your sacrum and your lumbar and obviously like what's happening at the hip, like those qualities are really, really valuable for conventional deadlifting for people who can't hold those structures.
Yep.
So to go through the ebbs and flow of doing sumo and conventional, I think is really healthy. And then on the counter side, if you're someone who wants to benefit from conventional and you are like more comfortable or stronger at doing sumo,
Yeah.
you can just do conventional deadlifting simply just to improve your hinge, because there's probably something more going on in the squat, because you're really tall and like you can't hinge for your fucking life.
Yep.
Because you need to have a hingier squat.
Yep.
So doing conventional deadlifting will benefit not only your squat, but it will benefit the deadlift long term, because you still have to do a hinge in the deadlift, right?
Yep.
So strengthening up that posterior chain is going to be invaluable in my experience as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like I was going to touch on it just there, like how you said that, you know, sumo deadlifters doing conventional benefits their hinge. I think that conventional deadlifters doing sumo is going to emphasize their push, because it's a lot more of a knee dominant movement.
100%.
Right? So they're going to learn how to keep their knees forward or like more in flexion for a longer period of time. So they can use more quads and more push, more adductors, that type of thing. But yeah, I'd say as well, really big factor to consider is like how strong is your lower back going into sumo deadlifting. If you're going to do it full time and try to expose yourself to some higher intensity work, you need to understand that, like you said, it does push you into a position of more lumbar extension. But if your lumbar erectors aren't strong enough to hold it, that's going to like let you put you in a position where you might just go.
Yeah, so it's like
fold.
like you could have the legs to push 300, but you have the back to hold 250.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So yeah, if you want to pick up some big weights, you've got to, you know, train all the muscles to be able to hold 300 if you want to deadlift 300.
Yep.
But yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I think we've covered a fucking shit ton, to be honest.
For sure.
But
glad I got stimmed up before this one.
that's good. Yeah, well, we'll be back next week with another episode. We currently have just been going on a whim with topics and stuff. We just kind of be like, oh, I want to talk about this. Yeah, sure. And we just fucking have a bit of a squabble, mate. So it's been good. But yeah, we'll be back next Thursday. The episode will be released on a Friday.
Yep.
But if you have any questions or requests, or you want to see more of what we want to produce on the podcast, feel free to message out to either Benny or I on Instagram.
Yep.
And then lastly, we've got an interesting episode coming up soon where we're going to be dissecting people's techniques.
Yes.
So looking forward to that, and you'll be able to watch it on YouTube, but the audio will be playable on Spotify. And now on Spotify, you can upload videos and you can watch them on your phone as well. So that's going to be invaluable content for all our listeners if you're looking to learn more about what goes on between the ears of us.
And it'll be a really good follow on from this episode specifically, because we'll basically just be applying a lot of what we just spoke about.
Fucking hell.
So if you listen to this and then watch that, you'll probably get a lot more out of that video in itself. So
it'll be good. But thank you very much again for listening. Leave 5 stars, a good review for us, and we'll see you next week. Peace out.